The thing that makes a great paladin isn't damage or healing output, it's how effectively we use our enormous utility pool to support the team. This video is going to cover every Season 3 Mythic Plus dungeon, showing exactly where your utility abilities can be used to help time your keys. Stay tuned because some of them aren't as obvious as you would actually think. So first up, Priory. Blessing of Freedom can be used on the first pull to a fully immune Suleiman's Thunderclap ability. With the Unbound Freedom talent, this will cover both yourself and a squishy teammate. The cooldown will allow you to cover every second Thunderclap. For pulls with Arathi Knights in them, Blessing of Protection will fully remove the bleed ability placed by the Impale. If a squishy team member receives this debuff, particularly if in the first pull Suleiman is also present, this is a good idea to use to protect them from the overlap. Blessing of Freedom can also be used to remove the root placed on an ally if they accidentally stand in a trap. While the effect is active, you can also run over the top of all of these traps to clear them. On boss 1, Blessing of Protection can be used to immune yourself or an ally out of the Savage Mauling ability. This is useful when this ability is overlapping with the ability being used by the other mini-boss, or if an ally looks like they might die from the maul. On boss 2, Blessing of Freedom will remove the slow that is applied when Castigator's Shield is cast. Bubble can also be used to soak all of the orbs from the Sacrificial Pyre. This is particularly useful on one of the 5 orb sets. On pulls with light spawns, we can use our taunt just above 25% on the mob to pull it away from the rest of the pack. This will help the tank keep the rest of the mobs out of the AoE circle, which will heal them if they're inside it when the cast finishes. On the pulls with footmen in them, we can use Hammer of Justice to stun them just before they die. This will prevent the AoE explosion that goes out once the mobs fall over. For Dawnbreaker, a little bit less variety in our utility usefulness. So Blessing of Freedom can be used on any pull with Shadow Mages in it to remove the Ensnaring Shadow ability. On the first boss, we can use Word of Glory or Lay on Hands to help the healer during the Healing Absorb phase. This is particularly useful when the Heal Absorb overlaps with the Beam ability. Protection Paladins can use Blessing of Spell Warding on themselves to immune one of the tank busters on the first boss as well. For Ara'Kara, we want to take the Righteous Protection talent. This will make Blessing of Sacrifice also double as a poison cleanse. In the first area, we want to be using Cleanse Toxins to remove poisons from allies, especially in pulls with lots of crawlers. With the talent I just mentioned, Blessing of Sacrifice will also double as a poison cleanse. On the first boss, if we use Bubble personally to block the damage from the web phase, we should be stacking on existing webs to conserve a little bit of space. Protection Paladins can also use Blessing of Spell Warding on an ally to immune the damage on them for that pulse. We should be using Hammer of Justice regularly to stop the Sentry Stag Shell from completing its cast. This is particularly relevant for specs that are taking the reduced cooldown for Hammer of Justice, making it only 30 seconds. On boss 2, Blessing of Protection can be used to immune an ally from the damage caused by the boss's charge. We should be using this if a less mobile caster is to get the charge and they may not be able to get out of it themselves. In the final area of the dungeon, the drones place a stacking slow/debuff on the tank. Blessing of Freedom will remove this. We want to coordinate this with the tank's cooldowns, or if we're in pugs, we want to be using it just before the Overseer casts their Erupting Webs ability. On the final boss, Cleanse Toxins will remove the poison debuff. Make sure that the person that you're using it on is positioned so that the erupting lines don't kill someone else. Blessing of Freedom can be used on the final boss to remove an ally from the web route as well as yourself. If you find yourself out of position with the suck-in, you can also use Bubble to fully immune it. Prot Paladins can use Spell Warding on themselves or an ally for the same effect. First up for Floodgate, Blessing of Freedom can be used to immune the root that is placed by the Architect as well as immune the damage from it. We want to be using this on the tank as they're gathering and then on any ally thereafter. Blessing of Protection will remove the dot placed by the divers if they get their harpoon cast off. We want to be using this if a kick is missed. We can use Blessing of Freedom on slow allies during Bronze Charge on the first boss. This will give them a 30% move increase and help them position the charge easier. We can use Hammer of Justice on Bombshell Crabs just prior to them dying to prevent the debuff from being applied to the group. This is similar to the Footman in Priory. On the Blood Warper pull, we can use Word of Glory or Lay on Hands to assist the healer with the Heal Absorb. On the final boss, bubbling ourselves or spell warding an ally prior to the Giga Zap ability going off will fully immune the damage that it causes. For Taza'vesh Streets, we can use Blessing of Freedom on allies that are affected by the Glyph of Restraint to remove the dot or the slow. On the first boss, we can use Bubble ourselves or Blessing of Spell Warding as a protection paladin prior to the interrogation ability being placed on an ally to fully immune the effect. Straight after the first boss, the Tracker Mob will place a root on the tank, which can be removed with Blessing of Freedom. On the Grand Menagerie boss, we can use Blessing of Freedom to remove the root debuff that is placed by the final boss. For the Postmaster boss, Blessing of Protection will completely negate the group soak if it's targeted on another player. If it goes on ourselves, we want to be using Bubble so that we can save Bop for either the next soak or if it goes onto an ally. In Taza'vesh Gambit, we can use Blessing of Spell Warding or Bubble on the first boss if we're targeted with the beam, allowing us to stand still and conserve some space on the ground. On Captain Hooktail, Blessing of Protection or Bubble can be used to fully immune the hooked ability cast by the boss. On the final boss, Blessing of Spell Warding can be used to fully immune the charge that goes out on players when breaking the stars. This is particularly useful if you don't manage to get every star in the first round, as the second debuff will hurt quite a lot. On the first boss in Halls of Atonement, Bubble or Spell Warding can be used as a protection paladin when targeted by the heaving debris. This will allow you to easily stack the ability on top of existing puddles to save space. Blessing of Protection can be used to remove the dot that's placed by the ankle biters in the trash after the first boss. This is particularly useful if a squishy ally gets a few stacks. Bubble or Blessing of Spell Warding for an ally can be used to immune the player that is targeted by the Flesh to Stone ability. On the final boss, Bubble can be used to immune soak 2 of the beams during the intermission. We want to be positioning ourselves on the corner as shown on screen so that we get hit by 2 beams at once and protect everyone from the damage. Lastly, Ecodome, a little bit shorter. There's not as much in here for Paladins. We can use Blessing of Protection to immune an ally targeted by the spear on the second boss. We can also use Blessing of Freedom during the intermission on the final boss to give the 30% move speed and allow people to more easily collect their spirits. Before we wrap things up, I just wanted to make note specifically of Blessing of Sacrifice and to a lesser extent, Lay on Hands and Word of Glory. What we want to keep an eye out throughout the dungeon for is players taking large amounts of damage that the healer might not be able to keep up with, where we can then sneak in and use a Blessing of Sacrifice to sort of help tide things over. It should also be noted that Sac can be used more or less like a pain suppression on the tank. It is worth noting, though, that you need to be careful when you do this, because if your tank is taking a lot of damage, it's going to get reflected to you and it can actually kill you if you're not careful. For Word of Glory, this is really handy to help a healer out if it looks like someone's going to die from an ability or if they're struggling during a certain point of the dungeon. We do want to use this somewhat sparingly, as it does come at the cost of a lot of damage if you're playing Ret and a lot of self-sustain if you're playing Prot, but it can be very useful in some situations. And lastly, Lay on Hands. If you see an ally getting absolutely bodied by an ability and it doesn't look like the healer can actually top them quick enough, we can use this as our panic button. We want to try and use it when the target is as low health as possible, because we do get cooldown reduction the lower the person's health is. And there we have it. There's the comprehensive utility guide for Paladin in Season 3 of War Within, specific to Mythic Plus. If you think I might have missed something, leave it down below in the comments, and I will create a pinned comment that covers any utility usage that might have been missed in this video. As always, drop a like and sub if you enjoyed the content. I'm also currently working on a challenge where I push all 3 Paladin specs on different characters to the 0.1% Mythic Plus title. I will pop a link on screen to that video. The first episode was out a week ago, and the second one should be out within another week. Otherwise, that's all from me. So until next time, gamers, take care.